recording. So we last left off, still going through 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. You can get it free on Hoopla if you have a library card or multiple other apps where you can access your library. It's free. We went through the first 12. So law number 13 is law of the pictures. And he basically talks about leaders must lead by example. And if you're not leading by example, as far as your work ethic, as far as your attention to detail, as far as insert subject matter here, if you're not leading by example in that, then it's going to be a lot harder for your team members and your followers to buy into you, to be able to follow you. And that piggybacks right off of the law of empowerment, which is giving power to your team to like lead themselves. Right. If you're not leading by a good example, it's going to be hard to empower somebody else to then go lead. Any thoughts, questions, comments about the law of the pictures?
Actions speak louder than words. We have all heard it. We have all said it. That's what comes to my mind when you're talking about that one, because it can't be the do as I say, not as I do mentality, because you're going to lose a lot of credibility.
Yeah.
People are going to watch what you do more than what you say. And the things that you say have to align with the things that you do for people to take you seriously.
Mm-hmm. So let's play devil's advocate a little bit. Let's say I'm the type that's not really organized. I'm not detail oriented. I'm just the driver. And let's say I'm hiring people, or there's people on my team who kind of complement that side of me that's not so good. How do you still model, right, work ethic, attention to detail, and all those things? How do you model the things that you want to see while not, I don't want to say not being capable, because you are capable. It's a skill that you can improve on. But how can you, if you're having a hard time leading by example because it's something that you struggle with, how can you still set an example for your team in that situation where they might have the skill set, the natural aptitude to actually do the thing that you're asking them to, but they want to see an example of what it is they should be doing and how they should be going about doing it?
You delegate. That's why you're hiring other people. You're not going to be the CEO and the CFO, because you can't, run the operational stuff in the business and do somebody's job in finance. You can't do it all. So if there's a skill set that you're not as great at, you're hiring people to complement you who are, so they're the ones that lead the charge on those specific areas. You should never be the one in front of the room preaching organization and attention to detail if they walk in your office and see Hot Mess Express. So you have the people who can model that and who you have put in positions of leadership, stressing those things while you work to get better at them.
So knowing when to empower your team to kind of hide your weaknesses, put the team in a zone so the kid doesn't get cooked, right?
I mean, that's why we hire people, though. We cannot be good at everything. And so we have to understand that about ourselves. We have to know our strengths and weaknesses so we can bring the right people in to still preach those values or those skills or those just inane, like, human thing, like qualities that we want to have in our business.
Word.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, only because a team is a team. Like, not everyone on your team is going to be good at everything. I just feel like that will create more of a chaos if you try to be the example of everything. And to have order and structure in your business and with your team, you have to delegate.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're spending too much time trying to be perfect and not actually getting anything done.
Very true. Very true. Which is ineffective in its own right. Law number 14, the law of buy-in. So again, all piggybacking off of one another: empowerment, the law of the picture, the law of buy-in. The people must buy into your vision, and they must buy into you as a leader. In the book, I didn't write it down, but he was saying how if you don't, they says employees, if they don't buy into the vision, they'll find another leader. if they don't buy into the leader, or if they don't buy into the vision, but they buy into the leader, they'll still find another leader who has the right vision. But if they buy into the vision and they buy into the leader, then you have you have like a loyal following. You have somebody who's going to buy in. He used the example of like Mahatma Gandhi. We all know, or at least have heard of Gandhi, you know, went to law school in London. After that, came back or went to South Africa, was helping with the apartheid down there and fighting for injustices, and went back to India and started this whole civil disobedience movement where initially everybody was just rioting to try to get control from Great Britain. But he comes in, leads by example, and gets a whole country to buy into his philosophy, which then leads to them being free. I didn't see, when I was reading through it, I didn't see any like concrete like business examples of getting people to buy in. But I mean, that's a great working example. I mean, you can think of a lot of leaders throughout the time who have gotten groups of people to buy into their philosophy, but they first had to buy in to the leader. Obama's another example that I just thought about off the head. Like with that whole "yes, we can," he was able to get a large groups of mainly African Americans, a lot of Black people, to buy into him as a leader, to even want to vote, to get him into office, to make that change. So that law of buy-in is huge. Like, how do we, so just opening the question, what are some things that we can do as leaders to get our team to buy into us as a leader?
I'm gonna pause, sorry, because I can't stop laughing, and I don't want you to think I'm laughing at what you're saying, because when you're talking about Obama, I can think of a really not so great example that with buy-in, and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna. Okay, whew. All right. So now, what was it?
Just some examples of things that we can do as leaders to, I don't want to say get our team to buy in, but for lack of better words, to get our team to buy into our vision and buy into us as a leader.
So you should be, as I have the handy dandy book open in front of me, you should be going over their buy-in process. Because I mean, he lays it out right there, is that the first one is they're buying into your character. Second one, that they're buying into your competence. And the third one, that they're buying into your commitment. I mean, that right there kind of lays it all out for us. We've already talked about character and how important that is. Competence should be self-explanatory. If you don't have any kind of clue what you're doing and it shows, you can't lead a group of people, and they're going to see that right away.
Right.
And commitment, I mean, that's the same thing. You can't tell people to show up to work every day on time and then you come in 2 hours late, because that shows you don't care. So why do they need to? I've been that in organizations. Like, I've definitely like seen that, like people who, you know, don't take things seriously, or they half-ass their work, or they don't show up but on time. And eventually it gets to me. I'm like, well, why am I busting my butt? Like, if they don't have to, why am I doing it? Especially if it's not a role that's pivotal to anything that I actually want to do in life.
Anything else to add, y'all? Anything that we can do as leaders to, you said that 3-step process, they buy into your character, your competence, and your confidence.
Commitment.
And commitment. Character, competence, commitment. 3 good ones. We're going to the next one, I believe, which is the law of victory. Good leaders find a way to win, you know, like a Jimmy Butler, like a
Aurelia. Her cousin plays for the Knicks, so
got them up out of there quick. See, that's what leaders do, you know. But as a leader, you have to find ways to get wins for your team. So this was, for me, this is a concept that was really hard for me to grasp, because it's like, in my head, how I think about it is like, okay, as a business, like, what wins can we get? Is it like, you know, the KPIs that we talked about before? Is it like the team is handling all their KPIs? Is that like a victory for the team? Like, is it a revenue goal that's like, what actually defines a victory for your team?
I don't think you can specifically define that, because that's going to be different for every business. I mean, the closing deals and making money have to be part of that, because if you don't do those things, your business doesn't exist.
Correct.
But that also comes down to employee retention. Are you keeping people, or are more people walking out the door each year? How's the morale in your office? If it's trash and people walk in and just kind of like drag their feet throughout the day and, don't really talk to each other, that different people are going to have different kind of standards for what wins are in their organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so putting it into some nice little box just doesn't work. You have to look at your organization, be like, okay, how in line that up? Like, what are my
What's a
victories
win for
here?
us?
Yeah. Like, how am I going to measure that? And that might change, because you may have really great culture to start, but then it may start to wear off if you're not reinforcing it every day and modeling it. And so you may get 2 or 3 years in and be like, oh crap, now we've got to add, let's rebuild our culture. Let's get those pieces back. Those will be wins for us.
Mm-hmm. So how often would you say you should set these goals for victory? Like, is it a quarterly thing? If we just had to guess, I know obviously there's no hard set rule, but as a leader, when do you seek to get new victories, or maybe change the goals that you have to continue to push your team forward?
If they're not hard and fast goals like closing deals and financial goals, I would actually stretch that out to more semi-annually or annually. I think it definitely needs to be done annually. But some of those more intangible things, they don't show right away. They're the things that bubble below the surface before they actually pop out. So if you're meeting every 3 months, it may look fine in March, but by June, it may be an entirely different picture. I think you've got to give those things time to get to the surface before you can really identify, because you can feel if things are off, but if you don't know the cause of it, you can't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like going to the doctor. Until you have a diagnosis, you cannot fix the problem.
Yeah.
You can keep putting Band-Aids on it or giving medicine that may or may not work, but you've got to give it time to actually get to the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
But I would treat it like a strategic plan. I mean, you're supposed to go back and reevaluate that every 6 months to a year, so you can adjust your goals and see where things are in the progress, and make changes wherever you need to based on where you now see the business going or where it should be going and isn't. But yeah, the intangible goals, I think, need to be treated with the same process.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as you're saying that, it's like we talked about earlier, I think it was law number 1 or 2, having that leadership lens in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the weeds as an entrepreneur, in the weeds as in like doing the work, let's say you're setting the goals for your team, but you're just so focused on doing the work and executing, but you're not taking the time to take a step back. I personally think that's when you can stagnate and when you can get into a rut, because it's like you're doing the same old, which is not a bad thing, but sometimes those things need to be tweaked a little bit, be fine-tuned in order to help you get the wins that you're seeking, whatever those wins might be.
Aaliyah, thoughts? Because you are in those trenches right now.
I know. I feel like just from like this part of business that I'm in, victories, like I find ways to win every day. Because if I focus on I have a goal of having 8 clients by the end of the year. So, that's my end goal. But what goals can I set today, tomorrow, and the next day that'll make me feel like that goal is obtainable at the end of the year? So whether it's, at the end of 6 weeks doing a reassessment for a client, for me, that's a victory. So I'm thinking 6 weeks long term, if that makes sense. So like doing it every 3 months or like semi-annually, I feel like as I grow, that'll be a lot easier for me to like think about. But for now, it's very much 6 weeks. This is my client's goal, so this is my goal for them. And then, client retention after these 6 weeks, I want them to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So like those are the goals that I'm thinking about. And when those things happen, whether it's getting a new client or, retaining a client, then like for me, that's a win.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that also does make a difference. Like when you're the one doing everything, you can evaluate faster. But when you've got an entire
Yeah.
organization, you've got different pieces that you're looking at. And so it definitely does make a difference.
Mhm.
And setting those goals daily or weekly or whatever, you obviously helps you from getting to December and being like, crap, I've got 5
Yeah, and I feel
months. What could I have done to get the other
right.
3?
And I feel like me being able to do that now as a person of one, so that when I do get a team and I am able to delegate, like the 6-week goal that I have for myself is now for them, you know? So that just kind of transfers over to the next person.
Well, and that's the delegation and the problem solving. You give them like, all right, make sure you're reevaluating these things and stay on this track. And then we'll meet in 6 months or, whatever, and see
Yeah.
like how is the whole team functioning. And
Yeah.
that's a great way to put that together.
I even think thinking out loud, like for myself, I think if you're trying to find ways for your team to win, to get that momentum, that victory, I think some of it also is the size of the goals that you set. Like for me, sometimes if I'm working on a project, I'm like, yo, bet we can get this done in like 2 weeks. All we got to do is A, B, C, D, E. And it's like, oh, okay, bet. But I'm not setting my team up to win because I'm setting these short deadlines. They don't have enough time to, so it feels like a loss because we set this artificial deadline. We didn't meet the deadline. So now, the team morale and the team momentum is, so I think that definitely plays a part into victory. It's like, what do they call it? SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound. Like setting those type of goals in your organization is going to help your organization when it comes to getting those wins that you need.
And being a little bit flexible, because this is more on a singular like focus for this, but you have to have some flexibility in the organization as well, because big things will come up that take priority over some of the smaller goals that you may have to be like, oh, well, we wanted to have this done by now, but we've got to put that on pause because it's not an urgent thing and we have this other urgent thing to deal with. But that's kind of like, even with my own personal business goals, I was doing really great for the first 4 months of the year. Or, well, actually, probably April is when the wheels started to come off. So the first 3 months of the year. But then as I started bringing more things on board and my own actual pay the bills work schedule kept getting busier and busier, it's like at some point I had to scrap the weekly goals that were working so well for me, because it gets to a point where I'm like, I'm setting these goals and I'm not meeting them. And so then I just want to say, screw it, and not do anything. I had to give myself that flexibility to be like, you know what? I'm not gonna put him down on paper because it's not attainable right now. I know what needs to be done because I've been developing these habits for 3 months. I need to look at tasks in sense of urgency. Is this urgent? Is it not urgent? If it's urgent, then it needs to get done. Whether that's regular work, business, personal, any of those things. If it's non-urgent, I need to put a pin in it and come back to it when I have the capability to get it done. And it does work in a business situation, because let's say, you are about to lose one of your biggest clients, but you've got like these minor little details that you wanted to get done on a project that isn't due for 3 months, but you wanted to knock them out because you had time. You have to put a pin in that and say, you know what, forget it. Let's pause this and let's deal with how we can retain this client so that we don't lose all of this money. That flexibility and understanding of what is urgent and non-urgent has to come into play at some point.
Are y'all familiar with Stephen Covey's the Matrix, like the law of productivity, where like quadrant 1 is a certain thing, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant. The way I look at me, probably not.
Say I've seen
Might
it.
be the way
I
I'm
can't remember.
saying
I
it.
can't. I know what you're talking about. I just can't remember what book I saw it in.
I'm gonna pull that up real quick and write that down in the chat. So it was sent to me. So I think this goes right in line with what you're talking about, because if we're trying to get these victories and we're trying to get this momentum, and again, I'm pretty sure y'all have all seen my handwriting. Good thing I can use this line tool so it won't be as bad.
Your artwork is like one of the best parts of this. Come on now.
I bet I did that part. Right. All right, so we got 1, Sorry. 4 quadrants. 4 quadrants. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so in quadrant 1, we got the things that are urgent and important. So that's deadlines.
It might have been the Maverick method that did this, because
Spell important, important.
is that bug?
Okay. Anything urgent and important. Then you got quadrant 2, which is probably the most important quadrant that as leaders we miss out on, things that are not urgent, but important. So they're really important, that strategic planning, that long-term casting the vision, those quarterly reviews, annual reviews. Quadrant 3, these are things that are urgent, but not important. So think like, phone calls. It's urgent, but is it really important? Probably not. That message on social media. Social media. What are some other things that are urgent but not important that y'all encounter in y'all business? I know for me, clients texting me sometimes. Texting me
that's a big one.
just to ask information that we might already have on the website. Like it's urgent. Like we got to give them the information if we want to make the sale, but it's not really important. We got quadrant 4, which is
You have one there.
it's not urgent, not important. So the trick is, as leaders, is to put majority of our attention here on the upper. Wow. I thought I just clicked it and it was going to stop, but it just kept going. So our goal as leaders is to be mainly on this upper half right here, handling things, well, mainly in this quadrant right here, number 2. But what often happens is, things catch on fire and we got to put out the fire. So we got to handle the urgent and important. But what often happens as leaders, well, I won't say often, let me speak for myself. When you're trying to do shit and get things done, you end up doing things that seem to be urgent because you want to get that small victory, right? That small, like, I did something thing. Yeah. You end up doing things that are urgent but aren't really important. And then as leaders, we shouldn't, unless it's wind down time, which in my opinion, I think that's still up here because it's not urgent, but it is important to take time to rest. But we should rarely ever be in this quadrant. So mainly doing things that are, it's not urgent, but important, scheduling those dentist appointments, talking to myself, scheduling doctor's visits, strategic planning. Those are all things that are, it's not urgent, but super important. Urgent and important things that are on fire, urgent but not important, as you see there, phone calls, social media, texting clients, whatever it may be. And as I'm looking at this and thinking about it too, it's like, it's even harder to use this matrix because like, it might be urgent but not important. Like, let's say I delegate a task to somebody and they're doing this task, but they're not doing it. In previous calls, we've talked about the ways to delegate. There's like a step-by-step process when it comes to delegation. But let's say somewhere along that process, they're having trouble and it becomes an urgent issue, but the task itself is not urgent. Oftentimes what leaders do is they make that unurgent situation. It's not really urgent, but the task is like important.
Yeah.
We immediately, well, I wouldn't say it's not urgent and important, but somebody's working on a task and they're having trouble with it. It's not a task that's like direly needed. A lot of times is we'll just stop everything to help them. So let's just say it's urgent for the person working on it, but in the grand scheme, it's like really not important for the business right then. And we'll just stop everything to help the team member that needs the help. And it's like, not necessarily. Let's put that leadership lens back on and figure out how we went about delegating to them to figure out if that's the problem in the process. Because what happens is you're helping somebody else put out a fire and there's a whole fire going on right behind you of things that you gotta take care of too. So that's like the consistent challenge when you have a team is like, got to delegate it properly. And then if it is on fire for them, like you have to equip them to put out that fire. Because if you don't equip them to put out the fire, now you're putting out their fire and you got a whole fire starting on your side.
Well, and you've got to keep paying attention to where things fall in that matrix, because just because it's in one quadrant one day doesn't mean it's going to stay in that quadrant. Because I was thinking about that, like when you were talking about sleep not being urgent, but it is important. If you consistently don't get enough sleep, it's going to become an urgent and important thing.
Facts.
And so those, it's a constant reevaluation. Okay, this is not urgent today, or it is and it's not important, but is it key? You have to keep making sure they're in the right places so that you don't end up with a fire that you created.
Mm-hmm. Mm. It's very real. Any thoughts on that, Aaliyah?
I'd have to agree. One thing I feel like for me that is kind of hard is just figuring out what belongs in what quadrant. Like for me, like I know, okay, we had social media and all those things in quadrant 3, but like, what if like that feels urgent today? Like Allison said, that's urgent today, but not tomorrow. So it's like, I want it to be urgent just because it's easier, because it'll make me feel good. But then I have this bigger task and it's like, that's hard. Let me push that down to quadrant 4, you know? So for me, it's just being disciplined and making sure I stick to the task at hand.
And that's where you're going to have to look at that, like on a more daily basis. Like, what things do I
Yeah.
have on my list today, but what needs to, like, absolutely has to be done first? Because I was even thinking about that. Can you go back to the little graphic for a second? Because I'm going to forget how you worded it.
Y'all see words on here?
Like, yeah, you don't see them. They're on there now.
I just see numbers. I
Mhm.
see 1, 2,
You might have to
3,
scroll
4.
down. Oh, you don't see the type?
No.
Oh, that's weird. So under number 3, like, because I was thinking this when you were typing it, like urgent but not important, clients texting, asking information. And that, like, when you first put it there, I was like, okay, I get why you're putting it there, but like, let's say they're asking for important information for an event you have tomorrow. That is now an urgent and important. And so
Mhm.
even like with Aaliyah, with your social media thing, like it doesn't even, social media itself may not fall into one category. It may depend
Yeah.
on what you have to like specifically do, because if you've got a client texting asking like for information on something that is 3 months out, or like even several weeks out, and you've got one that's asking about, or like trying to get in touch with you, because their kid's running late, or any number of things, like it's a different category.
Yeah.
Same concept, but the specifics fall into different places.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I had a thought and I lost it. Let's see if it comes
Sorry.
back. But it was it was along the lines of what you were saying, how these priorities kind of shift. And I feel like as leaders, we have to anticipate
Mhm.
how these things are going to shift and how they're going to move. Like for the example of social media, like, and I'll use a personal example, like every week I'm supposed to prepare social media clips. So I'm supposed to take one day, 1 hour to record a bunch of clips and then chop those up so they're already ready for social media. So that's a not urgent but important thing that gets scheduled for me.
Mhm.
But if I don't do that, then it becomes urgent and important, I suppose, right? Because for me, like I want to stay on social media and that's a priority for me and my business. So then it becomes urgent and important. Where it becomes urgent but not important is I don't have a concept, like I don't know what I'm going to share. I don't know. And now I'm just like trying to figure out stuff with the social media app open, just scrolling, right? Like that's where it's like, if you can prepare how these priorities are going to shift. Hey, I didn't record this week, so let me just skip today on posting and then schedule a day to actually do the recording and the posting, because that's what's most productive rather than trying to throw something together and just get it up there. So I think that's also part of it, is like, as a leader, seeing how these priorities are going to shift, anticipating it, and then preparing your team to fill those holes and fill those gaps. So, I'm sorry you can't see this though, Leah, because this artwork is beautiful.
She can see her artwork. She just can't see the actual
Yeah, I
type of
can't.
words. So
Yeah, I just see lines.
I just see lines.
so she can't see your little like actual type. So she's not missing the good stuff.
So we'll go ahead and end on that. So we talked about, just to recap today, the law of the pitchers: leaders must lead by example. The law of buy-in: people buy into you before they buy into your vision. And then the law of victory, which is try to figure out ways to get wins for your team. Leaders find ways to get wins for their team. We'll briefly talk about 16, which was the law of momentum, because it just all comes together, right? Like as you get these small wins, they build up and snowball into momentum, but that could be forward momentum and backwards momentum. Like if you're consistently in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3, that momentum is,
You're
that
gonna go down the wrong side of the hill.
you're going down the wrong side of the hill. Right. Or if you're number 4, I don't even know where you at. You probably ain't even started going up or down the hill. But again, I think just
Everybody else
prioritizing.
climb.
Say it again.
You're watching everybody else climb.
Nah, yeah, literally. But yeah, just momentum. Those small wins build up into huge wins over time, and keeping the right perspective, you can capitalize on that momentum. We'll get into it a little bit more next week, but I definitely wanted to introduce it because it was just right in line with everything else we were talking about, just synced up. Shout out to Maxwell, John Maxwell. Yeah, I don't have anything else. Any other thoughts, or you have any questions, comments, concerns?
Nope.
Gucci Man LaFleur. Aaliyah, I appreciate you hopping on.
Hold on one second.
know,
I'm gonna say, we're going back to you in a second, but I'm gonna say we need to give homework
good.
on this one because you haven't done homework in a while and you did the quadrant. So I think everybody needs to like take an hour this week, or even, take 20 minutes each day
Facts.
and figure out what tasks go in those quadrants for their business.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Because that's
Agreed.
something tangible. It's hard to give homework with some of these topics because, but that's something tangible that somebody can do outside of this.
So far, I'm with it.
So, all right, back to you, Aaliyah.
No, I was just saying, like, school was the only reason why I couldn't join them, just having class. But I would watch them afterwards, whether I was like riding in the car or, at the gym. Like, I'll send Allison pictures of me doing like my avatar and like all the quadrants and stuff. So I do go back and watch them. I do have to catch up on a few though.
You know where they at on the YouTube. Entrepreneurs Are Us.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Until we meet again, I appreciate everybody. Homework, like Coach AP said, write your quadrant, figure out the tasks that you're consistently doing on a daily and weekly and monthly basis, and try to put them in the quadrants that they're in. Try to anticipate when those things are going to switch and move places. Yeah, that was good, AP. That's good.
And knock them out before they get to number 1 if you can.
Yeah, that's a big fact. It's a big fact. Or delegate them way before they get to number 1. All right. Until we meet again, party people, I'm out. Peace.
All right.
Yeah.
See ya.